Sainath ji is a Magsaysay Prize winner and a journalist who focuses on social and economic inequality, deprivation, and poverty, particularly in rural India. Amrita Sen has called him one of the world's greatest experts on famine and hunger. In India, he has taught journalism for 36 years. His book, Everybody Loves a Good Draught, was declared a Penguin Classic in 2013. His more recent book, The Last Heroes Foot Soldiers of Indian Freedom, has also been published in 7 languages. And it contains stories of 15 very ordinary people, farmers, laborers, cooks, carpenters, and others, 8 of whom are still alive. In 2014, Sainath launched the People's Archive of Rural India, a unique online project on rural India where there are 780 living languages and lots of stories around arts, music, culture, and a lot more. The People's Archive of Rural India publishes in 15 languages, and it's an independent multimedia digital platform creating a unique database. Currently, he is the A.D. White Professor at Large at Cornell this year, and he's also the Distinguished Professor at Nalsa University of Law in Hyderabad. Thank you, Sainath. We can start with your presentation.
Yeah, I'll share the few slides I have in a minute. See, as I said, Madan is a very hard act to follow, and you've had presentations from schools that are doing fantastic stuff, like Madan's own place, like Vidyavanam, like Varnaville. So I will try not to repeat or step on that ground. Though I think something that Madan raised was very important. I mean, it came to him in a question and he pointed out the difficulty of it. Is how do you educate the so-called mainstream? I do not call it the mainstream, by the way. I don't know how we call, like, for instance, in media, I do not use the word mainstream. How do we call a media mainstream that excludes 85% of the population? Yeah, when it excludes them, but it is the mainstream. The mainstream there are passive recipients. So I'm going to try and show you something of our attempts or struggles or successful or otherwise, and not all of them are successful, in People's Archive of dealing with some of those issues. I mean, just to give you a little picture of what it is at the national level, the average Indian national daily dedicates 0.67% of its front page to news of rural origin. Within that, you can look for your Adivasi news. Okay, 0.67% of the front page editorial space is to news of rural origin. That's a 5-year average from the Center for Media Studies. And you know very well what are the tropes and modes in which Adivasis actually appear in the media. So yes, it becomes a very important thing for me not just to talk about the education and Adivasis, which far more competent people have spoken, but also of the struggling with where Madan left off, which is the education of non-Adivasis, the rest of us, on how the hell do we deal with this. The second thing is the context in which our discussion is being held. You know, as we speak, I mean, I think things are going in education in a way, in a direction very adverse to the interests of Adivasis. Yeah, one, you have a host of new initiatives, laws, policies, all of these invariably undermining their rights, whether it's desired amendments to Forest Rights Act, whether it was NRC CAA, whether it is anti-encroachment drives, whether it's digitization of land records, whether it's eviction from forests in the name of conservation, mining licenses, land grab. There is actually digital devastation being inflicted on the Adivasis. The only good news in this is 2 days ago, Mr. Nitish Kumar withdrew his proposed special survey. But that has, which is simply a digital survey of land, which has caused devastation in Jharkhand. Okay? How many people, old landlords of 200 years ago are reclaiming land under, suddenly their names appear on the records. Because what access does the Adivasi have to go and put up a digital record? Now, curiously, all these processes of displacement, let's face it, between 1951 and 1990, you've had something like 56 million people in this country displaced by projects, etc. Close to 50 million in any case. Adivasis form 8% of the population, but 40% of the displaced. Yeah. Now, then there is this, I mean, the other piece, I suppose, of good news in the last 2 days is that one of the biggest land grabbers of Adivasi, like the man who takes 79,000 acres in Hasdeo forest, is in some trouble, and we hope that the trouble pursues its logical course if there is such a thing as justice. Now, curiously, all these processes of displacing them, name of conservation, mining licenses, land grab, curiously, these processes go alongside constructing the Adivasis as props. You can find them in several tourism brochures, even in airline magazines. Get on to a flight and look, you'll find some exoticization piece over there. And just speaking of context, let's look at, say, what happened to Adivasi schools or Adivasi dominated schools in Adivasi dominated areas during COVID-19. Essentially, very simply put, you had millions of children lose 2 years of education completely. Whatever type of education, they lost it for 2 years. Let me give you an example. In Palghar, Thane area, Palghar, in Maharashtra, it's a very heavily Adivasi dominated, densely populated by Adivasi people. When COVID came on and the wonder world of online education came on, I sent our reporters to just with one question. Just find me how many Adivasi girls below 18 or below, how many Adivasi girls own smartphones or any phones or have easy access to phones, because your online education is all about downloading PDFs, downloading curriculum, downloading content. Our reporters told us, and you'll find the story on PARI, that they could not find in the Adivasi villages a single girl of 18 or below who owned her own smartphone. Now, how did they then try accessing? Did they try? Of course they tried. Now, this is an area where a lot of the Adivasis, the brother and father, for example, of that girl, work in the brick kilns. Okay, maybe come back on Sunday. On Sunday, maybe they go a little distance away and they come back on Sundays or on the weekend. So whatever holiday days they have in that period. And what happens here is that father comes back on Saturday night or this thing, or the brother, even more typically, comes back on the Saturday evening night. The girl is begging for the phone. This was during COVID-19. She's begging for the phone to be able to download her PDFs. Now, here's another thing. The PDFs have piled up. First of all, assuming that the father and brother give her the phone, which in the case of the brother is less likely because that's his medium of entertainment. He wants on Sunday to have his phone and sit around with his buddies. You can see all over Palghar and Thane, when you see little groups of boys sitting under a tree, passing around something, that's the phone on which they're watching videos or listening to music or whatever. Now she gets let's say she gets the phone. When she gets that phone, suddenly the number of PDFs to be downloaded is over 100. Who knows? Even if it's over 20, 30, but we have seen where it is over 100, it's piled up, maybe across a couple of weeks, close to exams. The fact is that they're going to have to move to a higher package on the provider, maybe give 200 rupees more to expand the bandwidth and to be able to download those PDFs, right? And while all of us were cheering about, while the mainstream media were cheering about the miracle of online education and how India has an advantage, millions of kids simply got no education at all. Many new learners slid back into illiteracy, in numeracy. Many new learners, apart from those who never got to learn anything, many new learners slid back. The other thing that the closure of the schools did, it had a devastating impact on nutrition and health, because of course the midday meals went out the window. Okay. And secondly, the the biggest programs in the country, like for like Kishori Suraksha Yojana, the giving of free sanitary pads to girls between the age of 11 and 18 is conducted through schools and junior college. Okay. Now suddenly that went, and it hit Dalits and Adivasis hardest, because you couldn't go out and purchase it. You didn't have the money. So many girls switched to insanitary methods, reverted to insanitary methods in the absence of proper sanitary pads. So that had health implications. The hunger from lack of midday meals also had implications for the schooling, obviously, for cognition itself. All in all, with all the new initiatives on education, etc., there's an internal colonization, literal in terms of invading their land and looting those for the profit of the rest of the country and otherwise. That's been happening for a while in India. To borrow the phrase that Madhushri Mukherjee used in one of the articles on PARI, the tools are religion, elite-run education, and commerce, all going by the name of development, that really devastates the existing traditional systems of living among the Adivasis. And as against this, there is a shrinking space for representing that resistance in the mainstream media. How much of Adivasi news gets covered? And who covers it? And from whose perspective? Here is where we bring our modest effort. I would like, by the way, to say that PARI publishes every day in 15 languages. Yeah, and we run a growing program of covering endangered languages. Most of, as the People's Linguistic Survey of India showed us, and which Mother knows much better than me, about 225 Indian languages have gone extinct in the last 50 years. That's one dying at the rate of every 90 days on average. So we try looking at these things. We also try looking at paintings, stories by and about Adivasis, land issues, water issues, agriculture issues, religion issues, gender, loss of culture, loss of livelihood, music and musical instruments, fairs and festivals. And we have actually put together a bit of a corpus of tiny videos to make proper films that we've made on Adivasis. Now, Vijay, if I can share.
Yeah, please go ahead. I think you should be able to.
Yeah. Now, Uh,
Yes, perfect.
yeah. So, I mean, by the way, that headline is really sarcastic, and it's based on "We do not dance for you." It's a very famous article and poem. What does it mean to be an Adivasi in India? I'm talking about the need for non-Adivasis to know how does the country look through their eyes. Like if you looked at the Adivasis who actually participated in the anti-CAA stir, more to follow in Nimad, Khargone, etc. In 2020, this was picking up like anything when, of course, COVID came down and was used as an excuse to crack down on all kinds of protests. One of the things I really love about the people speaking in the Madhya Pradesh in the Kuno area, as one of them, Anand Singh Badole, told us, if they want to only protect wildlife and not people, let them turn to animals for votes during elections. We neither get our forest rights nor even the status of human beings. By the way, it's our foundational principle in PARI that um, we try telling stories through the voices and lived experience of the people we are covering. Very often, we try getting the stories that told entirely by them, in which case it appears as their story. Now, here are some, the new Adivasi report on Adivasi life. Here you are, 50 million people displaced between 1947 and 97. Actually, that's large dams alone causing the dispossession of 16 million. Adivasis comprise 8.6% of population, more than 40% of total population displaced by developmental activities. 55% of Adivasi households in Jharkhand, 53 in Jharkhand, 55 in Odisha, are food insecure to varying degrees. Of this, 25% and 12% in Jharkhand, 12% in Odisha were found to be severely food insecure. 50% of children under 5 years in Adivasi and children in Jharkhand and Odisha alone are malnourished. 42% rooms in rural Adivasi schools are in need of repair. 26% of rural Adivasi schools don't have any drinking water facilities. 48.2% of the total children enrolled in Adivasi areas drop out even before they complete 8. If we look at any issue, be it of sanitation, education, nutrition, access to drinking water and education, we will see that despite 70 years of independence, Adivasis are the most deprived. That, by the way, all this actually makes the work that Madan was describing to us at the Tribal Academy School, the of the Vanavils, the Vidyavanams, and the many others you've been exposed to. It has to tell you how precious that work is, how incredibly important it is to all of us beyond the Adivasi children themselves. It really, when you see how the dominant situation is, it tells us how important it is to be supportive of these efforts, of these, positive forms of resistance. So this is what we look at in PARI. Struggles for Jal, Jungle, Jameen, lost livelihoods, development and displacement, changing cultures, religion, practices, gender, what we wear, languages, art and painting, music and poetry, fairs and festival, education, and reports. Reports is PARI runs a library which doesn't, our USP is not that we loan you books, we give them away to you. It's online library. You can download and publish for yourself, use in your teaching any report that you find on that library, Adivasis or otherwise. So this is some of the things we do under Jal Jungle Zameen. In Kuno, Now the whole country knows that the Adivasis are thrown out to bring in cheetahs, which, by the way, are still we are unable to release in the wild. They are still in confined spaces because whenever they're released, 3-4 of them promptly die. So you can see that but not many of us remember. I think the older ones amongst us will remember that this is the second time the same people are being displaced. Many years ago, in the 90s, they were thrown out of this area, out of the villages that they then inhabited. They were pushed out to bring lions from Gir in Gujarat, because the Gir lions were experiencing a population explosion, and they would simply, one disease could eliminate the last reservoir of Asiatic lions in the world. So it was decided by all the experts and policy that Gir lions, some families of Gir lions, be shifted. Now, people were moved out before the lions came. You can see the stories in Frontline at that time. PARI did not exist. They never came because the chief minister of Gujarat said it is Gujarat's pride. Mr. Modi was chief minister and he said it is Gujarat's pride. We will not part with a single lion. 2013, the Supreme Court of India ordered that within 6 months, this thing should be done, the transfer of the lions. It never happened because in 2014, Mr. Modi came to power at the center. And therefore, that project was scotched. And this time they were displaced for cheetahs. Now, this is a story recently done by Jacinta Kerkata, an Adivasi poet and journalist in Jharkhand. Oh, incidentally, if I go up here and click, you'll go into the story. But I'm not going to do that. We don't have the time. Now, in the online records, in the what you can call digital displacement, Nagendra Singh is the present owner of the land. Prior to him, Sanjay Singh was the owner. He sold the land to Bindu Devi, who it sold. The descendants of the landlords kept buying and selling the same land 2 to 3 times without the knowledge of the Adivasis who were living on it, tilling it, and had actually got possession. They have rent receipts going back to 1930. And so this is an Adivasi farmer in Jharkhand speaking who has lost his land to the central government's Digital India Land Records Modernization Program. What's happening with mining and iron ore in Karnataka? Just look at the red waters of the Holy Kunte, a vast rainwater reservoir. Water, the devastation with water is also a very huge thing. It works into your nutrition and therefore automatically works into your health, your education, your capacity for listening to things. 20 years ago, when I was, measuring the impact of the first decade of the reforms, so-called reforms, we had I was surrounded by a group of teachers, not all Adivasis, in fact, more non-Adivasis in Thane, who begged me to write an article, which I did, asking for midday meal rations to be doubled on Mondays. In my innocence and naivete, I asked, why Mondays? They said because the child in these parts has not had a morsel of food worth mention since Friday midday meal. It's impossible on Monday to teach the children in the morning before the midday meal because their bellies are on fire. Here you have the PARI carries lesser known but simply fantastic poets like Vajay Singh Pargi and also Jitendra Vasava. I don't like to die. I'm going to read you a few lines. When the mountains collapsed, the ravines dried up, villagers invaded the forest, days of roaring and ululating were gone with the wind, not a breath was left in my lungs, not enough to play a flute. And he is telling you about the migrations, the forced migrations, but saying that, listen, we are there. We just have to now migrate. We came to the cities. We lived inside plastic walls, shivering in the cold, sweating in the heat, soaked in the rain. No shelter for us in the bungalows that we built as construction labor. Auctioned at the crossroads, that is the Mazdoor Mandi, selling our labor like livestock. I feel like leaving this hell, this daily humiliation, this suffocating life. I want to return to my village to rest my head in its lap, but there lurks a snake, hunger, hissing, waiting to devour us, and I don't like to die. Education. Projectors and computers gathering dust at the teacher Bashir Tramboli says in the ZP school of Osmanabad town. Unpaid electricity bills are 1.5 lakhs. Koloshi school children, unlike other schools, they thought they had a chance with online classes during lockdowns. The Madh Ashram Shala school, with its largely tribal student population, simply shut down. This is a very new development in Maharashtra, and it's a horrible, horrible development. These are Pardis, a denotified tribe, and Paut Kavasti school is being, would you believe that 14,783 schools with 1 to 20 students, an earlier, more enlightened approach saw that you reach the children where they are. You reach the children in remote locations. Now, the government is closing down or merging 14,783 schools. 14,783 with 1 to 20 students, with a total of 1,85,000 pupils across. It simply means you will see a major rise in child labor and a collapse in education of mostly tribal and Dalit children. Well, this is just a fun part for you about how English is taught in no potato is grown. No potato is grown within a 50-mile radius of that village in Idukki. Yam, I think, is grown in the nearby regions, but no potato. But it's lovely. I love the singing. However, that was just a aside. Here, other Pardi schools. The one really beautiful Pardi school in Amravati district. Yeah, and really, Matinsk, my old friend Matin of the Pardi community. This school was riven and destroyed by the Samruddhi National Highway, the Nagpur-Mumbai Highway. Literally, they could have done a few meters of realignment to spare the school that. No, they drove that highway right through that split, cleaving it in half. 7 years of work have been wasted, as Mateen says. And they say that the question of compensation does not arise. Here's where we try doing something with languages. Students in Mokkada singing a traditional Katkari song. Just a few lines of it. There are still schools and committed teachers that try doing something. There is this teacher in Palghar, for instance. who is pushing for the Varli language, which is of course endangered. Here in Mokkada, Varli is the most widely spoken, and there are many children who speak the language in school. If we want to teach them English, we first have to introduce the Marathi word for it, and then explain the same word in Varli. And then we teach the word in English. So he is really trying to, retrieve and rejuvenate a language that is in serious, serious danger, the Varli language. In Chhindwara, the Bhariyati language is declining very fast. Bharia farmer, he is himself is an Adivasi, an accomplished author and language archivist. He says his mother tongue Bhariyati is losing ground to Hindi. In fact, much of the language has already been lost. And he says what his own people are asking him, what is the use of Bhariyati? Does it give us Rozgar? Can we run our house by just speaking our mother tongue? It's a question that bothers both language enthusiasts in different parts of the place. This is something we are very proud of. What we've done, this is the first ever archive of art by Adivasi children. Yeah, what the volunteer teachers did in these villages of Jajpur and Kendujar districts of Odisha, what the teachers did was to read, by the way, they read 8 PARI stories. They edited it, molded it their way, read on subjects like Adivasi culture, village life, environment, and climate change. Remember that all the stories that were read out, Adivasi voices were dominant in the stories, not that of the reporter or an essayist. Then the kids asked to produce paintings, did with almost no resources, using those cheap 8 rupees a pack for 6 Camlin felt pens, using charcoal, using pencils, using whatever they had. They created this fantastic archive for us. You have one child kept drawing paintings of, there are 98 children who have contributed to this. One child kept drawing paintings, one painting where elephants were invading the village. Another painting where bears were invading the village. When we asked her, by the way, we held a public exhibition formally in Bhubaneswar, in which none of us said a word. The students were guides to the exhibition for their own paintings. And this girl explained that before I was born, she's 12 years old, she said 15 years ago, Poonam Purti, of the Kolha tribe, she said, 3 years before I was born, some factories came up near our village and cut down lots of forest, as my parents told me. And ever since then, the hungry animals are invading our village. One of the USPs of, here is a guy and his father trying to teach their mother cycling. They just went on with, here is a USP of this. With every painting, we have a 30-second video clip of the artist explaining her painting, explaining why she chose a particular subject, so that it is all of them doing the talking, not us, not the reporter or anyone else. So this is now we are trying to replicate this from other parts of the country. The archive belongs to the children. Oh, we know that it had a phenomenal impact because the activists from the villages and some of our people, one of our people went back, were telling us that there were crowds of relatives, aunts, grandmoms, uncles, brothers, elder sister congregating at the village to see the father's phone, because we designed this archive entirely for mobile. But we do a lot of other stuff in culture. Here you can see Jitendra Vasava's poem.
જેહે ને માં દેસુ આખાનારા વાઇક સભ્ય લોકો હું આમાં મવા ચાડુલે અસભ્ય જાહેર કી દે દો આન આમાં લોક સૌતલ અસભ્ય અનુભવ કેરા લાગે જેહે ને માં દેસુ આખાનારા વાઇક સભ્ય લોકો હું આમાં મવા ચાડુલે અસભ્ય જાહેર કી દે દો આન આમાં લોક સૌતલ અસભ્ય અનુભવ કેરા લાગ્યા તેહે ને માં યાહકી મવા ફૂલાને આથ લાગવા से बीए माँ बाहकाल मवा चाड़ू नाव पसंद ना तेहे माँ पाऊ चौठाम.
You know, the other great Adivasi poet of Gujarat whom we showed you, Pargi, with his phenomenal talent, with his phenomenal experience, he could never get a work in the media beyond that of a proofreader. The man is a phenomenal poet, he was dying when we interviewed him. Yeah, but he could not get anything more. He could not rise above that thing of branding as a proofreader. Now, again, another thing by Jacinta Kerketa, a story which shows us she visits a place of worship in Jharkhand. As I said, religion, elite education, and commerce. The trip led her to examine the uneasy relationship between power, politics, of religion. So 2 temples have come up in the place. The Hindutvavadis have also brought a temple there. The Pandits came and popularized the idea that Anjani was in fact Hanuman's mother, Ranjay says. Anjan was then declared the sacred birthplace of Hanuman. By the way, I guess there are about 30-40 places that have also been declared the sacred birthplace of Hanuman. Like there are hundreds of temples around Faizabad, Ayodhya, which claim to be the birthplace of Ram. And before one could understand anything, a Hanuman temple came up right on top of the hill, and the place was declared Anjan Dham. Now there are donation boxes for 2 different gods, serving 2 different groups, placed near their individual places of worship. One near the cave of the Adivasis, the Anjan cave, one inside this temple, and a third one belongs to the Bajrang Dal and sits in the courtyard. This is a fully Adivasi area. There were no Pandits in the Anjan before. It is only recently that they've come, but this has become the birthplace of Hanuman. There is also the entire, we have tried exploring the storytelling genres of Adivasis, including at the Niyamgiri plateau. In Odisha, we've tried recording the saving and preservation of indigenous seeds and grain. We've tried looking at India's many musical instruments and astonished by how many are actually right out of Adivasi communities. We have been recording songs and singers in the tea gardens of Assam, people who are not given Adivasi status, but basically Santals who went from what is today Odisha, Madhya Pradesh, West Bengal, 200 years ago to work on the tea gardens for the British. And I just want to show you a few lines. A brilliant singer, young fellow called Santo Tanti. And we are helping him cut his first album.
झुमुर गाए नाचिब सबाई आसाम देशेर राखिब सम्मान झुमुर गाए नाचिब सबाई आसाम देशेर राखिब सम्मान झुमुर गाए नाचिब सबाई आसाम देशेर राखिब सम्मान.
He explains his music. He explains the music. And in between continues with the song.
ওজন কাটা রে বাবু ধরমে ধরিবি গরিবের তুই হক না মারিবি যখন আমরা ছোট রাগি ও মা বাবা আমরাকে পিঠে ভান্দি রে বাবু বাগানে লিজ
He's also a poet and a writer, and we have done this song as a full video, as a full song video, and all the performers are in it are from the tea gardens. The women who dance, the men who play the musical instruments, and Santo himself. Well, livelihood issues, of course, is central, and all the earlier things I showed you are also about livelihood. But if we take it out specifically, put them together, rain hat makers for the monsoon, the whole works. And we try digitizing any important material reports on Adivasis. We are selective. We don't go for colonial ethnography and stuff, for instance, but we do put together the different reports. And with that, I think I've shown you a hell of a lot of slides, and there's too many more. So let me end there and stop sharing.